Spinning on turntables, blasting through speakers, and streaming across the world, these albums have defined generations. But behind every legendary record is a producer, the invisible architect who shapes raw creativity into sonic perfection. These are the people who turned good bands into legends, who captured lightning in a bottle, and who changed how rock music sounds forever. Today we're counting down the top 10 best American rock album producers, exploring the albums that made them legends, and discovering why their work still matters today. From number 10 to the undisputed king at number 1, let's dive into the stories of the people who built the soundtracks to our lives. Starting at number 10, we have Andy Wallace, the mixer-producer hybrid who made aggression sound beautiful. In an era when heavy music was still figuring out how to break into the mainstream, Wallace arrived with a secret weapon: clarity without compromise. His journey to legendary status began with Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss in 1990. The thrash metal gods needed someone who could capture their intensity without drowning it in mud, and Wallace delivered a record that was both brutal and pristine. But this was just the warm-up. The following year, Faith No More tapped Wallace for Angel Dust, an album that shouldn't have worked on paper, mixing metal, funk, pop, and pure chaos. Wallace didn't try to smooth out the rough edges. Instead, he gave each element room to breathe while maintaining the album's manic energy. The result was a record that sounded massive yet detailed, proving Wallace understood that heaviness isn't about volume alone. Then came 1991's game changer, Nirvana's Nevermind. While Butch Vig produced the sessions, it was Wallace's mix that made the album a cultural phenomenon. He took Kurt Cobain's raw anguish and the band's underground edge and made it radio-ready without neutering it. The guitars roared with aggression, yet every word, every drum hit, every bass note cut through with crystalline precision. When Smells Like Teen Spirit exploded onto MTV, it was Wallace's sonic architecture that made suburban kids feel like they were in the same sweaty club as the band. But Wallace wasn't done redefining heavy music. In 1992, he mixed Rage Against the Machine's self-titled debut, a record that merged hip-hop, metal, and political fury into something the world had never heard before. Tom Morello's guitar scratches, Zach De La Rocha's incendiary vocals, and the rhythm section's groove all existed in perfect balance, aggressive yet controlled, raw yet refined. Why he's one of the best. Andy Wallace made aggressive rock sound massive without losing clarity, defining how alternative and metal crossed into the mainstream. He proved that heavy music could be both sonically sophisticated and commercially viable, opening doors for an entire generation of bands that followed. At number 9, we have Adam Kasper, the unsung hero of post-grunge who helped rock find its footing after the 90s explosion. While others chased trends, Kasper focused on emotion, honesty, and power, qualities that would define rock's transition into the new millennium. Kasper's early work included engineering on Fatboy Slim's You've Come a Long Way, Baby, showing his versatility across genres. But his true calling emerged when he connected with Seattle's evolving rock scene, particularly with a band called Foo Fighters. In 1999, the Foos were at a crossroads. After the massive success of The Color and The Shape, frontman Dave Grohl wanted to strip things back, to capture the feeling of a band playing together in a room. Enter Adam Kasper for There Is Nothing Left to Lose. Recorded in Grohl's basement in Virginia, Kasper helped craft an album that felt intimate yet expansive, vulnerable yet powerful. Tracks like Learn to Fly soared with melody while maintaining the band's rock credibility. The album won a Grammy and proved that post-grunge didn't have to mean cynicism. It could embrace hope and melody without losing its edge. The partnership worked so well that when the Foo Fighters returned to the studio for 2002's One by One, Kasper was back behind the board. This time, the band wanted something heavier, more urgent. The sessions were turbulent. The band actually scrapped an entire album's worth of material before starting over. Kasper helped them channel that frustration into focused aggression, resulting in tracks like All My Life and Times Like These that balanced raw power with radio-friendly hooks. Why he's one of the best. Adam Kasper captured post-grunge emotion with polish, helping rock transition into the 2000s without losing power. He understood that vulnerability and heaviness aren't opposites, they're partners, and when combined correctly, they create something timeless. Coming in at number 8 is Don Gehman, the architect of heartland rock realism. While others were chasing synthesizers and studio polish in the 80s, Gehman was capturing the sound of working-class America, honest, direct, and powerful. Gehman's first major statement came with John Mellencamp's American Fool in 1982. Mellencamp, then still known as John Cougar, wanted to shed his manufactured pop image and create something authentic. Gaiman understood the assignment. He captured Mellencamp's bar band energy while giving the songs enough polish to dominate radio. Jack and Diane became an anthem, not despite its simplicity but because of it. The record sold over 5 million copies and established the template for heartland rock. The following year, Gaiman and Mellencamp doubled down with an album that pushed even further into American roots music. Tracks like Crumbling Down and Pink Houses had grit and social commentary, but Gaiman's production kept them accessible. He knew when to add layers and when to strip everything back to just voice, guitar, and truth. But Gaiman's greatest commercial triumph came in 1994 with an unlikely band from South Carolina. Hootie and the Blowfish's Cracked Rear View shouldn't have been a 21 million selling juggernaut. The band played straightforward rock with no gimmicks, no angst, no attitude. Just honest songs about life, love, and loss. Gaiman's production was warm, inviting, and utterly unpretentious. Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, and Only Wanna Be With You became inescapable because they felt real. In an era dominated by grunge cynicism and alternative posturing, Gaiman and Hootie offered something radical. Sincerity. Why he's one of the best. Don Gaiman perfected heartland rock realism. Albums that felt honest, relatable, and massively commercial. He proved that you didn't need to be edgy or experimental to matter. Sometimes the most powerful production is the one that gets out of the way and lets humanity shine through. At number 7 we have Bob Clearmountain, the man who defined the sound of arena rock. If you've ever stood in a stadium with 50,000 people, fist in the air, feeling like the music was created just for that moment, you've probably experienced Clearmountain's work. Clearmountain's journey to becoming rock's premier mixer began with the Pretenders' self-titled debut in 1980. Chrissie Hynde's band needed someone who could make their new wave meets rock sound both edgy and accessible. Clearmountain delivered a record that felt alive, immediate, and perfectly balanced. But this was just the beginning. In 1984, Bruce Springsteen was ready to step out of his blue-collar rock comfort zone with Born in the USA. Producer John Landau brought in Clearmountain to mix the record, and the result changed everything. Clearmountain took Springsteen's heartland rock and gave it a contemporary sheen. Massive drums, synthesizers that enhanced rather than overwhelmed, and vocals that cut through like a stadium announcer. The album sold 30 million copies and spawned 7 top 10 singles. Dancing in the Dark, Glory Days, Born in the USA. Every track sounded made for arenas because Clearmountain understood spatial dynamics like few others. 2 years later, Bon Jovi needed that same magic for Slippery When Wet. The New Jersey Rockers had the songs Livin' on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, Wanted Dead or Alive. But they needed a mix that would make those anthems explode out of radios and PA systems worldwide. Clearmountain's mixing gave the album its signature sound. Huge drums that felt like cannons, guitars that soared and crunched in equal measure, and John Bon Jovi's vocals sitting perfectly on top of everything. The record sold 28 million copies and turned the band into global superstars. Why he's one of the best. Bob Clearmountain defined the arena rock mix, huge drums, wide guitars, radio-ready power. He understood that great rock production isn't about capturing reality. It's about creating the sonic equivalent of a perfect performance, where every element hits with maximum emotional impact. At number 6 is Andrew Sheps, the bridge between analog warmth and digital clarity. In an era when many producers were either stubbornly analog or completely digital, Sheps found the sweet spot, modernizing rock production without killing what made it human. Sheps first made waves mixing Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication in 1999. The album was a comeback for a band that had been through hell. Guitarist John Frusciante had left, returned, and the band needed a record that honored their funky past while embracing a more mature sound. Producer Rick Rubin had captured great performances, but the mix needed to be special. Sheps delivered an album that felt simultaneously intimate and expansive. Tracks like Scar Tissue, Other Side, and the title track had a warmth that invited listeners in while maintaining the band's trademark energy. The album sold 16 million copies and proved the Chili Peppers were far from finished. 7 years later, the band returned with their double album Stadium Arcadium in 2006. Sheps was back, facing the challenge of making 28 tracks feel cohesive without becoming exhausting. He succeeded by varying dynamics, textures, and spatial treatments. Some songs felt vast and epic, others intimate and funky. The album won 5 Grammys and became one of the band's defining works. But perhaps Sheps's most challenging project came in 2008 when Metallica called for Death Magnetic. The band was trying to reclaim their thrash metal roots after years of experimentation, and they needed a mix that could capture their aggression while maintaining clarity. The project became infamous for the Loudness Wars controversy. The album was mastered extremely loud, causing some fans to complain about distortion. However, Sheps's original mixes showcased his ability to modernize metal without losing dynamics, bridging Metallica's raw past with contemporary production techniques. Why he's one of the best. Andrew Sheps modernized rock production without killing dynamics, bridging analog warmth and digital clarity. He proved that technology and soul aren't enemies. When used thoughtfully, modern tools can serve the song while honoring the humanity of the performance. Cracking the top 5, we have Butch Vig, the Wisconsin studio wizard who took underground grunge and turned it into a global phenomenon. As a producer, drummer, and co-founder of Garbage, Vig understood both sides of the glass, the artist's vision and the technical execution needed to realize it. Vig's ascent began with Smashing Pumpkins' debut, Gish, in 1991. Billy Corgan's band had ambition. They wanted to sound massive, layered, almost orchestral, but without losing their alternative edge. Vig spent countless hours layering guitars, creating walls of sound that felt both dense and detailed. The album established the Pumpkins as contenders and proved Vig could turn studio obsession into sonic beauty. 2 years later, the Pumpkins returned for Siamese Dream, and Vig's perfectionism reached new heights. The sessions were grueling. Corgan insisted on recording multiple guitar tracks for each song, sometimes dozens of layers to achieve the perfect texture. Vig facilitated this madness, helping Corgan realize his vision while keeping the songs emotionally direct. Today, Cherub Rock. Disarm. These songs were simultaneously massive and vulnerable, angry and beautiful. The album went 4x platinum and cemented both the Pumpkins and Vig as forces in alternative rock. But Vig's defining moment came a bit earlier, in 1991, when 3 scruffy guys from Seattle walked into Sound City Studios. Nirvana had underground credibility but needed someone who could capture their raw power while making them accessible to a wider audience. Vig was the perfect choice. He understood their punk DNA but also recognized the pop sensibility in Kurt Cobain's songwriting. The production of Nevermind was a careful balance. Vig encouraged multiple takes, building arrangements that served the songs rather than overwhelming them. He added subtle layers, extra guitars here, backing vocals there, that made the tracks fuller without sacrificing their edge. When Smells Like Teen Spirit kicks in with that iconic guitar riff, it's Vig's production that makes it hit like a freight train, while remaining clear enough for every element to shine. Why he's one of the best. Butch Vig turned underground grunge into a global sound without sanding off its danger. He understood that mainstream success and artistic integrity aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes it just takes the right producer to find the balance. At number 4 is Steve Albini, the recording engineer who rejected everything the music industry stood for. Albini famously refused to call himself a producer, insisting instead on the term engineer. To him, production implied shaping and manipulating an artist's vision, while engineering meant capturing it honestly. This philosophical stance made him one of rock's most important and uncompromising figures. Albini's approach was radical in its simplicity. Set up microphones, press record, capture the band as they actually sound. No studio tricks, no overdub safety nets, no polish, just truth. His breakout moment came in 1988 with Pixies' Surfer Rosa. The Boston band's music was already weird, soft verses exploding into screaming choruses, Black Francis's surreal lyrics, Joey Santiago's jagged guitar work. Most producers would have tried to smooth out these contradictions. Albini did the opposite. He captured the Pixies in all their uncomfortable glory. The recordings were raw, dynamic, and felt like the band was in the room with you. Kurt Cobain would later cite Surfer Rosa as a primary influence on Nevermind's sound, though ironically that album took the opposite production approach. Speaking of Cobain, when Nirvana returned to the studio for their 1993 follow-up to Nevermind, they wanted to escape the polish of their breakthrough. They wanted rawness, honesty, discomfort. They wanted Albini. In Utero was deliberately abrasive. Albini recorded the band in a way that emphasized their punk roots over pop accessibility. David Geffen, head of their label, reportedly hated the initial mixes, calling them unreleasable. But that was exactly the point. Cobain wanted an album that couldn't be mistaken for mainstream product, and Albini delivered. Tracks like Heart-Shaped Box, Rape Me, and All Apologies sounded confrontational and human, capturing a band in pain rather than a band chasing hits. That same year, Albini worked with PJ Harvey on Rid of Me. Harvey's music was already intense, raw explorations of desire, power, and vulnerability. Albini's recording emphasized every uncomfortable detail. The scrape of fingers on guitar strings, the breathiness between vocal lines, the impact of every drum hit. The album sounded dangerous because it was captured without safety nets. Harvey's performances were laid bare, and Albini's engineering made listeners feel like voyeurs witnessing something almost too intimate to watch. Why he's one of the best. Steve Albini rejected Polish entirely, capturing truthful, brutal human recordings that still influence rock today. In an industry obsessed with perfection, Albini championed imperfection as the most honest form of expression. His legacy isn't just the albums he recorded, it's the philosophical stance that artists' visions matter more than commercial concerns. Breaking into the top 3 is Bob Rock, one of the most successful and controversial producers in rock history. Rock made his name doing the impossible, taking heavy music mainstream without watering it down. He turned metal bands into arena-filling juggernauts, and while purists often criticized his polished approach, the results spoke for themselves. Rock's first major statement came in 1989 with Mötley Crüe's Dr. Feelgood. The Crew had commercial success but were often dismissed as a hair metal novelty act. Rock changed that perception by giving them a production that was massive, punchy, and undeniably powerful. The title track and Kickstart My Heart sounded huge. Every element dialed in for maximum impact. The album hit number 1 and went 6x platinum, proving that heavy music could dominate the mainstream when produced correctly. But Rock's defining achievement came 2 years later when Metallica walked into One-on-One Studios in Los Angeles. The thrash metal titans had built their reputation on speed, complexity, and underground credibility. Their previous albums, Master of Puppets and Justice for All, were loved by metalheads but had limited mainstream appeal. Metallica wanted to expand their audience without betraying their fans. Rock's approach was controversial from day one. He slowed them down, simplified arrangements, added melodic elements, and polished everything to a mirror sheen. Songs like Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, and Nothing Else Matters were more accessible than anything Metallica had done before. Purists screamed sellout. But when the Black Album hit shelves in 1991, it became a cultural phenomenon, eventually selling over 30 million copies worldwide. Rock didn't make Metallica soft, he made them focused. Every riff, every vocal line, every drum fill served the song. The production was huge but clear, heavy but melodic, commercial but still distinctly Metallica. It was a masterclass in expanding an artist's audience without destroying what made them special in the first place. 5 years later, Rock was back with Metallica for Load, an album that pushed even further from their thrash roots. Gone were the breakneck tempos and extended instrumentals. In their place were groove-oriented rockers, ballads, and even blues influences. Tracks like Until It Sleeps and Hero of the Day showcased a band willing to evolve, with Rock's production giving them the space to explore new territory. Why he's one of the best. Bob Rock made heavy music commercial without weakening it, changing metal's relationship with mainstream audiences. Love him or hate him, Rock proved that commercial success and artistic quality can coexist, and that sometimes challenging your audience is the most punk rock thing you can do. At number 2 is Brian Eno, the conceptual architect who treated albums not as collections of songs, but as complete sonic environments. Eno came from the art rock world. He was a founding member of Roxy Music and a pioneer of ambient music. When he moved into production, he brought a completely different philosophy. Albums should be systems, experiences, journeys. Eno's revolutionary approach emerged in his work with Talking Heads. When he connected with David Byrne and company for 1979's Fear of Music, the band was already intellectually curious and artistically ambitious. Eno pushed them further into experimental territory, incorporating electronic textures, unconventional rhythms, and studio techniques that blurred the line between playing and producing. Tracks like Life During Wartime and Cities felt urgent and strange, like transmissions from an alternate reality where art punk and world music collided. The following year, Eno and Talking Heads created their masterpiece, Remain in Light. The album was a revelation, influenced by African polyrhythms, layered with loops and electronic textures, held together by Byrne's increasingly abstract lyrics. Songs like Once in a Lifetime and Born Under Punches didn't sound like anything else in rock music. Eno's production philosophy was on full display. He created sonic environments where the listener got lost, where traditional song structures dissolved into hypnotic grooves and layered textures. The album challenged what rock music could be. But Eno's biggest commercial success came in 1987 when Irish rockers U2 sought him out for their fifth album. The band was successful but creatively restless, feeling confined by their post-punk sound. Eno, along with co-producer Daniel Lanois, took them to the desert, literally. Recording in locations around the American Southwest, Eno helped U2 craft the Joshua Tree, an album that married their anthemic rock sound with Americana influences and atmospheric production. Eno's touch was everywhere. The shimmering guitars on Where the Streets Have No Name. The spacious verses and explosive choruses on I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. The haunting atmosphere of Running to Stand Still. The album wasn't just a collection of hit singles. It was a cohesive artistic statement about America, spirituality, and searching. It sold 25 million copies, won a Grammy for Album of the Year, and established U2 as the biggest rock band in the world. Why he's one of the best. Brian Eno treated albums as systems and environments, not just collections of songs. He brought an intellectual rigor and artistic ambition to rock production that expanded the genre's possibilities, proving that commercial success and experimental artistry could not only coexist but enhance each other. And now, at number 1, the undisputed king of American rock producers, Rick Rubin. If there's one word that defines Rubin's career, it's reinvention. While other producers chase trends or perfect techniques, Rubin does something far more valuable. He strips music to its emotional core and helps artists find themselves again. Rubin's approach is deceptively simple. Remove everything that doesn't serve the song's emotional truth. No studio trickery, no unnecessary layers, just the essence of what makes a piece of music matter. This philosophy has made him the go-to producer for artists in crisis, bands seeking rebirth, and legends looking to reclaim their relevance. His rock journey includes multiple reinventions. In 1991, Red Hot Chili Peppers were talented but inconsistent, known more for their chaotic energy than focused songwriting. Rubin took them to the Mansion, a supposedly haunted house in Los Angeles, and created an environment where the band could explore without pressure. The result was Blood Sugar Sex Magik, an album that perfectly balanced the Chili Peppers' funk energy with melodic songwriting. Under the Bridge became an unlikely hit, a vulnerable ballad from a band known for party anthems. Rubin understood that the Chili Peppers had depth beneath the energy, and he gave them the space to show it. The album went 7x platinum and established them as more than just a funk rock novelty. 8 years later, the Chili Peppers were in trouble again. John Frusciante had returned after years of drug addiction, and the band needed a record that honored their past while embracing their maturity. Rubin was back for Californication, creating an album that sounded both familiar and evolved. The production was warmer, more intimate, with Rubin emphasizing melody and emotion over aggression. The album sold 16 million copies and proved the band had staying power. But Rubin's most famous collaboration was with the most unlikely artist imaginable. In 1993, Johnny Cash was considered a relic, a country legend whose best days were long behind him. Nashville had given up on him, and Cash was contemplating retirement. Rubin saw something different. A voice that carried decades of pain, wisdom, and authenticity. For American recordings, Rubin stripped Cash down to the absolute basics, just voice and acoustic guitar. No backing band, no production sheen, just an old man and his songs. Rubin had Cash cover everything from folk traditionals to contemporary alternative rock, including a haunting version of Soundgarden's Rusty Cage. The album was a revelation, reminding the world that Johnny Cash was not a nostalgia act, but a vital, relevant artist. It won a Grammy and launched a series of American recordings that redefined Cash's legacy. And yes, Rubin also co-produced Metallica's Black Album alongside Bob Rock, contributing to the stripped-down, song-focused approach that made it the best-selling metal album of all time. Why he's the best. Rick Rubin strips music to its emotional core, repeatedly reinventing artists at their most critical moments. He doesn't impose a signature sound, he excavates the truth buried inside each artist and gives it room to breathe. Whether it's making the Red Hot Chili Peppers vulnerable, giving Johnny Cash a second act, or pushing Metallica toward simplicity, Rubin's genius lies in knowing what to remove rather than what to add. He's not just a producer, he's a musical philosopher who has changed how we think about what production can be. From Andy Wallace's crystalline aggression to Rick Rubin's minimalist philosophy, these 10 producers didn't just make great albums, they shaped how entire generations of music sounds. They proved that production isn't about imposing a vision on an artist. It's about finding the essence of what makes that artist special and giving it room to flourish. These are the invisible architects behind the records we love, the songs that define our lives, the albums that make us feel understood. They worked in studios while artists got the glory. But without them, rock music as we know it wouldn't exist. Which producer surprised you? Which album changed your life? Let me know in the comments section. I respond to everyone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into production history, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our music documentary content. Your support helps us keep diving deep into the music that matters. Until next time, remember, behind every great band is a great producer, and behind every great producer is someone who understood that the best art comes from truth, not perfection.